At 2:26 a.m. local time, roughly 2.6 million liters of Russian military fuel were already moving toward Crimea, hidden inside 86 tankers marked as civilian milk, water, and chemical trucks. Russia was no longer moving fuel this way by choice. Its familiar road and rail routes into the peninsula were becoming easier to track, easier to predict, and harder to trust. From nearly 900 meters above the highway, a Ukrainian Shark reconnaissance drone had already identified the convoy. 20 Ukrainian drones were already positioned less than 9 kilometers away. At that distance, they could reach the road within minutes. Still, Ukraine did not launch. One early strike might destroy a tanker. It might also warn the other 85, sending them scattering across the wide highway before the rest of the attack could arrive. So Ukraine let the fuel keep moving. The target was obvious. The convoy's real weakness was not. Ukraine was not hunting the fuel first. It was hunting the few vehicles that kept all 86 trucks moving as one. The first of those vehicles revealed itself near the middle of the convoy. Below the Shark, the highway ran through flat industrial ground south of Mariupol, bordered by dark fields, abandoned service buildings, and long strips of roadside dust. One tanker suddenly dropped from 44 to 29 kilometers per hour, a brief trail of dark exhaust appearing behind its cab. No truck tried to pass. Within 11 seconds, the entire rear half of the column slowed with it, while the gaps between vehicles stayed almost unchanged at 27 to 31 meters. Civilian drivers would have spread out or gone around. These drivers held formation. 42 seconds later, a covered service truck moved forward from the rear. It pulled across the lane beside the struggling tanker, leaving just enough space for the rest of the convoy to keep moving. At the same moment, Ukrainian electronic support receivers detected a short transmission from another truck, nearly 650 meters ahead. It reduced speed before most of the convoy could even see the problem. Only then did the pattern become clear. The covered truck was a disguised recovery vehicle. The vehicle ahead was controlling the column. Ukraine had not identified the convoy through paint, logos, or license plates. It had identified the few vehicles directing every move the convoy made. The labels said water. The timing said military. The convoy was now confirmed. But the open highway beneath it was still giving all 86 tankers too many ways to survive. A slow civilian truck entered the convoy from a side road. The tankers did not brake hard. They opened their spacing, used both hard shoulders, passed the truck, and closed the gap again in less than a minute. Not one vehicle had to stop. That was the problem. The highway was nearly 11.2 meters wide, with hard shoulders and open ground on both sides. Even if an FPV destroyed one tanker, the vehicles behind it could still go around. The 27 to 31 meter gaps created another layer of protection. A fire in one vehicle would not automatically reach the next. Ukraine ran the strike several ways. Every simulation ended with the same result. 18 FPVs might disable 6 to 8 trucks. The rest could scatter, reform farther south, and keep moving toward Crimea. But Ukraine had seen this pattern before. Whenever one road into Crimea looked exposed, Russian supply columns shifted to a backup route. 10.8 kilometers ahead, an old industrial service road offered the convoy a route it had used before. The road was only 6.4 meters wide. A tanker needed almost 18 meters to turn around. At 44 kilometers per hour, the convoy was less than 15 minutes from the junction. Ukraine did not need more drones. It needed Russia to leave the highway. And Russia would only do that if the road ahead suddenly looked more dangerous. 6 Ukrainian drones appeared above the main road, more than 4.5 kilometers ahead of the convoy. They were flying at roughly 150 meters, far higher than necessary for a hidden approach. A Russian Supercam S-350 spotted them almost immediately. But the drones did not turn toward the tankers. They crossed the highway, made 2 slow circles above the bridge, then stayed over the same patch of road. One dropped sharply toward the deck before climbing again. At almost the same moment, Russian electronic support equipment detected a short radio transmission near the bridge. No single sign confirmed an ambush. But the convoy commander did not have time to wait for confirmation. The junction was still about 6.4 kilometers ahead. At 44 kilometers per hour, the commander had less than 9 minutes to decide whether to remain on the exposed highway or commit the convoy to an industrial road used during earlier alerts. That revealed the purpose of the 6 drones. They had not been sent to attack the convoy. They had been sent to make the highway look too dangerous to trust. At 2:32 a.m. local time, the order went out. 6 minutes later, the lead tanker turned onto the industrial road. One by one, the remaining vehicles followed. Ukraine had not destroyed a single vehicle. It had just redirected more than 2,100 tons of fuel. Now the convoy had to keep moving long enough for the road itself to begin closing around it. The first 12 tankers entered the industrial road without meeting any resistance. No mines, no barricades, no drones diving out of the dark. For the first 900 meters, the convoy still held close to 36 kilometers per hour. After nearly 2 quiet minutes, the detour looked like the right decision. Then the road began to change. About 1.7 kilometers in, the asphalt dipped between 2 raised embankments and narrowed around a sunken section of pavement. The lead tanker had to slow to 13 kilometers per hour. The drivers behind could not see the problem yet. They kept entering. The gaps between vehicles collapsed from nearly 30 meters to barely 10 or 12. Each tanker was more than 10 meters long. The convoy was no longer a line of separate trucks. It was becoming one continuous block of fuel and steel. By the time the 57th vehicle turned off the highway, reversing the decision would have taken at least 28 minutes. The road had not trapped the convoy with explosives. It had trapped it by taking away the room to pass, turn, or reverse. And before Ukraine had fired a single FPV, Russia began searching the sky for the drone that had watched the convoy compress itself. The Russian response came before the first FPV reached the road. More than 3.2 kilometers into the industrial route, the R-1330Z Zhitel began flooding the area with electronic interference. The Shark's video shook, froze, then returned several seconds late. Below, the convoy stretched through 2 bends in the narrow road, its headlights broken into separate clusters by raised embankments and abandoned industrial buildings. For 51 seconds, Ukraine lost the center of the column. Launched too early, and the FPVs could strike the wrong vehicles. Wait too long, and the lead tankers might clear the compressed section before the attack began. When the picture returned, the operators did not waste time recounting all 86 trucks. They searched for only 3. The command vehicle, the recovery truck, the Zhitel. The command truck had moved about 430 meters ahead of the recovery vehicle. Zhitel remained nearly 1.1 kilometers farther back, beyond the second bend. The road had separated the 3 vehicles, keeping the convoy organized, moving, and protected. The bends and raised embankments prevented the Zhitel crew from applying the same jamming pressure along every approach to all 3 vehicles. Ukraine no longer had 86 targets. It had 3 functions to break. At 2:43 a.m., the first FPVs entered the road. They passed the nearest fuel tankers without touching them. 4 FPVs entered the industrial road at less than 5 meters above the ground. 2 stayed low behind the embankment as backups. The other 2 flew past the nearest tankers. No warhead struck the fuel. The first drone stayed low between the embankment and the convoy, then drove into the engine compartment of a covered service truck near the center. There was no huge fireball. The truck simply lost power, slid sideways, and stopped across most of the 6.4-meter road. The tankers behind it began stacking up within seconds. The second FPV continued another 430 meters and struck what looked like a civilian delivery vehicle near the front. The explosion was smaller than anyone watching the fuel convoy expected. The answer appeared seconds later. The first target was the recovery truck. The second was the command vehicle. The 2 reserve FPVs remained behind the embankment, ready to strike again if either vehicle kept moving. Within 15 seconds, 3 different instructions appeared on the same radio network. The front was told to keep moving. The center was ordered to stop. The rear was told to reverse. Each command made sense by itself. Together, They forced the front to pull away, the center to stop, and the rear to compress into the blockage. Ukraine left the fuel untouched and struck the two vehicles that kept it moving toward Crimea. But nearly 1.1 kilometers behind them, the Zhitel was still active, and its crew had just identified the direction of the first attack. 6 radio-controlled FPVs rose behind the convoy almost at once. 6 strong control links appeared from the rear almost simultaneously. To the Russians, this looked like the main attack. The jammer concentrated its power toward the rear. The video on 3 FPVs broke apart within seconds. 2 slid away from the road. The 6th dropped into the dirt less than 300 meters from the convoy. For 26 seconds, every visible sign suggested Ukraine had lost the entire wave. But those 6 drones had never been expected to hit anything. Their only task was to create the strongest concentration of radio traffic on the battlefield and keep the Zhitel crew fixed on the rear. The crew did not shift its attention. Every new signal still pointed to another attack from the same direction. Then, 4 FPVs appeared on the opposite side of the road. They were flying barely 2 meters above a drainage ditch, hidden beneath the raised embankment until the final 400 meters. Their video remained steady. Their control did not break. The steady video exposed the difference. These drones were linked by physical fiber-optic cable. Zhitel could flood the air with interference, but there was no radio link to cut. The first FPV climbed over the embankment and struck Zhitel's transmitter section from the side. A second continued through the drainage ditch toward the sunken section of road. The remaining 2 stayed low, as reserves in case either strike failed. Zhitel was still powerful. Its crew had simply committed that power against the wrong attack. The 6 drones lying behind the convoy had failed to hit anything, and had still opened the route for the real strike. At 2:47 a.m., the second fiber-optic FPV continued through the drainage ditch, then climbed over the embankment beside the sunken section. It ignored the nearest trucks. Its target was a tanker slowing inside the narrow depression. The warhead struck low between the cab and the tank, tearing through the fuel lines. The tanker lost control, turned across the 6.4-meter lane, and stopped sideways. Fuel poured beneath the vehicle and spread across the pavement. Flames spread across the pavement and into the edge of the drainage ditch, while black smoke rolled back over the vehicles behind. 17 tankers ahead accelerated toward the far end of the industrial zone. For a few seconds, the rear still appeared to have an escape route. Then brake lights came on through the entire back half of the convoy. Drivers began reversing toward the junction, but they made it only a few hundred meters. The disabled recovery truck was still blocking most of the road. More tankers were pressing in from behind, and the gaps between them had collapsed to barely 11 meters. One vehicle turned slightly across the lane. The trucks behind it stopped. The trap was now visible from one end of the road to the other. Ukraine had blocked one end with fire. The convoy had blocked the other with its own length. In less than 95 seconds, the column split into 3 groups. 17 vehicles escaping forward, more than 40 trapped in the center, and the rest locked near the junction. Headlights, brake lights, white tanker bodies, and rising smoke now formed an unbroken line between the embankments. Most of the vehicles were still intact, but more than 2 million liters of fuel had become a stationary depot stretching almost 1 kilometer along a road too narrow to escape. The burning trucks were only the immediate loss. The deeper damage was to another supply route Russia could no longer trust. By sunrise, the road still held dozens of intact tankers, but the convoy's mission was already over. To reopen the route, Russia would have to send in new recovery vehicles, repair teams, electronic warfare support, and additional security, through the same narrow road still being watched by the Ukrainian shark. Every rescue vehicle entering that road would become another target. The convoys behind it now faced 3 choices: stop, wait, or take a detour 65 to 75 kilometers longer. That would add roughly 90 to 110 minutes to every trip. Russia would now burn more fuel, simply trying to deliver the fuel that had failed to get through. Ukraine had not only stopped one disguised convoy, it had made another road into Crimea too dangerous to trust. Every watched route forces Russia to drive farther. Every blocked route forces it to spread more protection across fewer remaining roads. And every delay makes Crimea harder to supply, more expensive to defend, and more difficult to hold. What decided this operation? The false threat on the highway, the narrow industrial road, or the decision to strike the command and recovery vehicles first? Tell us in the comments.